Semicolons are quite misused as punctuation marks. They have a bad reputation. Semicolons, for whatever reason, students generally think that by using semicolons it makes them seem smarter, more well-informed, more a better writer. When in actuality, most times it does exactly the opposite. It makes your writing choppy and nebulous and with strange constructions. I counsel my students not to use them. Just don't use them. But if you must, here are the rules. Here are the rules. All right, let's go with this. It's not too hard. The general crux of this discussion is that, well, like I said, use them sparingly, if at all. I mean, in an essay of 2,000 words, you may be using one or two semicolons. One or two. One, two, maybe none. I don't know. Do not litter an essay with semicolons. It's a bad move. Even if you do it properly. Even if you use them properly, it's a bad move. Like I said, they have a bad reputation and they make your writing sophomoric in nature. You don't want that. The main rule for semicolons is that there has to be an independent clause on both sides of the semicolon. What is an independent clause? I'm so glad you asked. Man, I'm so glad you asked me that. An independent clause is a group of words with a subject and a verb that can stand alone as a complete thought. Oh, okay, so you got to have a full sentence, let's say, on both sides of the semicolon. Not on one side and not the other, but on both sides. You have to have an independent clause on both sides of the semicolon. You know, like a semicolon, it's this punctuation mark, and you got to have an independent clause on both sides. Both sides. Full sentence on both sides is required. Look here. We have the sky is blue. Oh boy, that is an independent clause. Sure. You can walk up to someone in the hallway and say, "Hey, man, the sky's blue." It's a full sentence, right? So here we have the semicolon here, don't we? We have it right here. Bam. See that? So now we have the second independent clause. I love a blue sky with no clouds. Roger that. We'll get to that more in a second. Now, semicolons go outside quotation marks unless they're present in the original quotation. Look at this example I have. Jimmy yelled, "This is not how I thought it would be." Now look right here. We have the semicolon outside of the quotation marks. The way to remember that is the semicolon, unless the semicolon was already there when the quotation marks came out of the sky and encircled it, unless the semicolon was already there, it's going to bump its head right here. It can't get under there. Look, it's too tall. He's a tall dude. He's not a comma or a period. He's a tall dude. He can't get in there. Okay, so you have to have an independent clause on both sides of the semicolon. Well, do we have it here? This is not how I thought it would be. That's the first independent clause. Jimmy yelled, "This is not how I thought it would be." The second independent clause is his expression, however, did not seem to fit the urgency of his tone. Good. Yes, we do have an independent clause on both sides, and we did well there. Okay, here we go. We're going to beat this horse to death. Use a semicolon to join closely related independent clauses. I want you to key in here on, I'm going to bring some of these up. I want you to key in here on the idea that it has to be closely related. Look right here. Closely related. All right, so let's check it out. Hey, I love to eat apples, semicolon. I love to eat pears. Those are two things that I love to eat. They're related. It's very closely related, right? Now, where's the semicolon? We have it right here. See that? So you have an independent clause, I love to eat apples, and an independent clause, I love to eat pears, and you have a semicolon separating them. That's completely proper grammar. You can do it, but I caution you not to. This next one, okay, next one. The sky is blue. I do love. Okay, back up. The sky is blue. There's the first independent clause. Great, wonderful. Good job, Shanafelt. So proud of you. Now, here's the independent clause. No, here is the semicolon. You have independent clause, semicolon, and then you have the next independent clause here, which is I love a blue sky with no clouds. Great. And that's it, man. That's it. That's how you use a semicolon. You have two closely related independent clauses, and you can join them. Now, there are only two ways in the entire universe to join complete sentences, to join independent clauses, and they are this: a comma and a coordinating conjunction. That's in a different lecture. Or a semicolon. That's the only two ways. That's it. There are not any other ways to join independent clauses. Okay, so let's check this one out. We went on a sunset dolphin cruise. Semicolon. We loved every minute. See how we loved every minute is closely related to the sunset dolphin cruise, because it gives you more information about what we did there, how we felt about it. We loved every minute of it. Sounds great. So we have this semicolon here, and that is all fine. This is an independent clause. We went on a sunset dolphin cruise. Fine. And then the next independent clause is we loved every minute. Yay. Okay. All right. Let's move on to this next one. I'm going to highlight these semicolons for your viewing pleasure. There you go. Now, now check this out. This gets a little more complicated here. These sentences up here were simple. This one right here is more complex. It's not a complex sentence, but it is more tricky. In 1845, I did not put the comma there because that's one prepositional phrase. It's up to you. If you have one prepositional phrase, you can choose whether to put the comma there. In 1845, virtually all domestic travel was accomplished by horse, rail, or steamboat. These are items in series. See that? We have the commas here for the items in series. You definitely need to put the last comma there, all right? But we're talking about semicolons. In 1845, virtually all domestic travel was accomplished by horse, rail, or steamboat. Semicolon. In 1945, virtually all domestic travel was accomplished by airplane or automobile. Okay. See how those two sentences are directly correlated? They're directly related. The one is begging for the other. That's when you might use a semicolon. You could just as easily say, comma, and in 1945, virtually all. That would be a way to join those two independent clauses. But in this case, the writer seemed to want to use a semicolon. Now, sometimes one independent clause is just begging for the information that another independent clause provides, and that's when a semicolon is appropriate. Like here. The first independent clause in 1845, all domestic travel was accomplished by horse, rail, or steamboat. Done. Great. But then this next part goes with it. In 1945, virtually all domestic travel was accomplished by airplane or automobile. See, they go together, and you can join those with a semicolon. The last one here is on this page is a negative example. Now, I'm very careful I try not to use too many negative examples because it's hard to teach from contrast. But here it is. Do not do this. I love to eat apples. Semicolon. The sky is blue. Do not do that. Do not do that. Do not do that. Do not do that. Why? Because those two independent clauses are not closely related. They're not closely related. This is the particular reason why semicolons have such a bad rap. Because students generally want to just litter their paper with that. It's a way to just start writing a sentence and just keep on writing different sentences and just scab them all together. But that's not proper. It has to be each independent clause has to be closely related. Good. All right, now you can, I told you just a minute ago that there are only two ways in the universe to join independent clauses. That is true. The two ways are a comma and a coordinating conjunction, and or nor for but yet so, or a semicolon. Now, some students say, oh, Shanafelt, Professor, what about this, what if we use however or although? You know, although. Fine, I have two howevers here. You could just as easily transplant one of them with an although. Right here. Anyway, let's start up here. He often watched TV when there were only reruns, semicolon. However, comma, she preferred to read instead. All right, check this out. Use a semicolon and a comma to join closely related independent clauses that have a transition expression. A transition expression is like an introductory element. However, moreover, as a matter of fact, although. Check it out. Let's look at this next one. She thought the guttural wheezing sound was someone snoring. Semicolon. As a matter of fact, see that transitionary expression? It was a howler monkey in the treetop. This is an independent clause. It was a howler monkey in the treetop. And this is an independent clause. She thought the guttural wheezing sound was someone snoring. Okay, check it out. Look how closely related those are. There's a guttural wheezing sound. And it turns out, hey, guess what, man? Turns out it was a howler monkey in the treetop. Costa Rica. You should go there. It's good. Let's go with this next one then. The larger contestants of pie eating contests usually do well. Semicolon. However, not all competitive eaters are overweight. Now you could easily just erase the however and put although, semicolon, although, right? So any introductory element, and now an introductory element is not an independent clause. Remember, it has to be a dependent clause or a phrase or a word, okay? So, but still, there is no difference between this right here and just joining two sentences with a semicolon. It's just that one of them has an introductory expression. Okay, moving on. Now, you can use semicolons to separate. I think this is like the only other use for a semicolon other than to join independent clauses. You can use a semicolon to separate items in series that contain commas. You use the semicolon because it gets too jumbled otherwise. Okay, here we go. The invited speakers are Eddie Vedder. All right. And everybody knows who Eddie Vedder is, hopefully. Eddie Vedder, semicolon. Now this is these are items in series now. Normally they would be separated by commas. The president of Democracy Now!, Kipley Pratt. Cool name, Kipley Pratt. But anyway, here's the next semicolon. And let me just go like this. The invited speakers are Eddie Vedder, Kipley Pratt, and Laurie McBroom, and Cormac McCarthy. But inside of each one of those items in series, there is a comma. The invited speakers are Eddie Vedder, the president of Democracy Now!, comma, Kipley Pratt. See that? It tells you more information about who she is, this little portion here, the president of Democracy Now! And then Lorelei McBroom, a Pink Floyd backup vocalist. See how you have the comma here? And then finally, and Cormac McCarthy, the author of Blood Meridian, my favorite book. Ooh, oh yes. All right, so here we have the comma here because it's telling you more information about who Cormac McCarthy is. It's a non-restrictive element there. Okay, cool. So you want to separate items in series that contain, where in the case that the items contain commas. So here we have three items here. Four items, including Eddie Vedder here. And they're separated by semicolons, but inside each item, it contains a comma. And that's why you wouldn't want to use commas where you see the semicolons here, because it would be a jumbled mess, wouldn't it? Okay? Guys, ladies, hardly anybody ever does this. I don't think it's great writing. You know, I mean, it still looks like a jumbled mess. But if you need it, here it is. Okay, and then the final one is the same thing. Another list might be written like this, and there's a colon. James, the author, Mark, the athlete, and Jill, the billionaire. Get it? Comma there, separate it. Comma there, separate it with a semicolon. Comma, and finally your comma there. Okay, these are like a positive. It's like a list of people with more information about who they are. Okay, great. And then finally, we have semicolons go outside the quotation marks. And I kind of lumped them in with colons here. Same thing, same idea. So here we have right here, let's go with, he said go. His tone was intense. So he said go is a full sentence. He said go. That's a full sentence. And then you have the semicolon here, separates two independent clauses. His tone was intense. All right? That's not great writing, but it is proper grammar. Sometimes that happens. Jimmy yelled, "This is not how I thought it would be," semicolon outside. See that? His expression, however, did not seem to fit the urgency of his tone. Independent clause here at the beginning, independent clause here at the end, separated by a semicolon, and here we have a sort of parenthetical element. That's why an interrupting expression, that's why we have enclosed it with commas. And the final one, Martin Luther wrote what he called the 95 Theses, and this is a colon, and it sets up a list. Notice that colon is outside those quotation marks. So look, we have semicolons, semicolons, and the colon all outside the quotation marks.